A 100-point game. Arguably the most well-known record in the NBA, and the origin of one of the most famous pictures in sports. Back on March 2nd, 1962, Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points in a Philadelphia Warriors victory over the New York Knicks, a single game scoring record that still stands today, at least in the professional ranks. But rather than just making this video some kind of history lesson about Wilt, I want to take a look at the possibility that a modern day NBA player could break the 100-point barrier, and there's no other player better suited to make that happen, at least in my opinion, than James Harden. And there are multiple things about Harden that make him the ideal candidate for this video. It isn't just his incredible skills and sky-high scoring average, but also the sheer volume of his production. Over his last 5 years as a Rocket, plus the games so far this season, Harden has led the league in minutes twice, made shots once, shots attempted 3 times, threes made and attempted each of the last 3 seasons, free throws made and attempted each of the last 6 seasons, and points 4 times, including this year, a season in which he is currently on pace to lead the league again. So what we have here is an incredibly talented player with a history of amazing scoring performances on a team tailor-made for his playing style and putting up a ton of points, and a sky-high usage rate and shot volume that could potentially put him in range of getting to 100 points in a single game. So with all that said, how exactly could this happen? Well, first let's take a look at the 2 most relevant comparisons of modern guards that have put up amazing scoring numbers in a single game. There are 2 guards in the modern era of the NBA to have scored 70+ points. Kobe Bryant's 81-point game and Devin Booker's 70-point game. And what we're going to do here is look at these 2 performances and get an idea of the necessary criteria for a massive scoring performance in the modern NBA, and then we'll get all nerdy and dive into the numbers that Harden would have to reach to actually get to 100. So let's review both of these games. For Kobe, it was a 6-point game going into the 4th quarter, and you can see all of the incredible shooting numbers from all areas of the floor. For Booker, it was a similar story in terms of it being a competitive game, as the Suns actually ended up losing by 10, and again, lots of shots on pretty good efficiency. So pretty simply, we can take a couple of things from this. To score a ton of points in a modern NBA game, you have to get a ton of shots in all areas of the game, threes, twos, and free throws, and you have to have a hot shooting night from all of those areas. And most importantly, the game has to be close, which boils down to 3 things: shot volume, shot efficiency, and a competitive game. There are plenty of recent performances by James Harden and others in which they scored 50 to 60 points through 3 quarters, but never got a chance to build on that in the 4th because the other team simply couldn't keep up. If the Lakers and Suns didn't need those points from these 2 guys, then their historic performances never would have happened. And as an added bonus, if overtime could happen, then that would also really help out the guy trying to go for 100 as well. So as we go through this next section, keep this list of things that we need in mind. So first, as we go through the stats, let's take a look at how exactly Harden gets all of his points, going off of his numbers so far this season. As of researching this video, Harden gets a little bit over 14 points per game off of threes, 12.5 points per game off of free throws, and a little bit over 11 points per game off of twos. By percentages, that's roughly 37% from 3, 33% from the free throw line, and 30% of his points coming from twos. So to get to 100 points at his current offensive splits, he would need to make a little bit over 12 threes, make 33 free throws, and 15 twos. Now let's compare those benchmarks of the ideal splits for a Harden 100-point game to the NBA records in each category. The most made threes in a game in league history is Klay Thompson with 14 in 2018, and the second most is 13 by both Zach LaVine this year as well as Steph Curry in 2016. The most free throws made in league history is Bob Cousy with 30 in a 50-point game in 1953, in which he played 66 minutes, while the second most is 28, with Wilt in his 100-point game and Adrian Dantley in 1984, both getting to 28 free throws in a single game, with Dantley being the post-merger record in the NBA. In terms of most twos in a game in league history, it is set at Wilt with 36 in his 100-point game, and second and third are also him with 31 and 30 respectively. However, since the merger, the record is Michael Jordan with 26 in a 64-point game in 1993, and second was David Robinson with 25 in a 71-point game in the last game of the season in 1994, as he was trying, ultimately successfully, to win the 1994 scoring title over Shaq. So from that, it looks like the threes and the twos needed seem attainable on their own for Harden, at least from a sample of the most historically significant statistical performances in league history. But it's also unlikely that those two things would happen in the same game, and the 33 free throws that Harden would need to get to would be a bit of a jump from the league record of 28 since the merger. It is worth noting, however, that in terms of free throw attempts, I think Harden could get to that 33 number in a single game, because in league history, there's plenty of instances of an incredible amount of free throw attempts in a single game. They were just all for bad shooters. And I know all of these were big guys, and some of them were Hack-a-Shaq and Hack-a-Jordan and Hack-a-Dwight, I get that, but when you consider how good Harden is at getting to the line, he already has 8 games in his career in which he has attempted 23 or more free throws in the same game, and how many fouls are called in NBA games now, it's at least possible that he could get to the line 34 to 38 times in a single game and only miss 1 or 2 of them, which is probably his best path to actually making this 100-point dream a reality. But as I said, that's just one piece of the puzzle, and his career highs in the other 2 necessary categories make it seem like this probably won't ever happen for him. We already talked about the free throw stuff, but his career highs for made threes is 10, and his career high for made twos is 14. So he would have to break his career high in both of those categories to get close to 100 points in the same game, while also setting an NBA record for made free throws. Now, of course, if he's going to get to 100, he would have to break a ton of his career highs and NBA records. I know that. It just would have been nice if, while researching this, I'd found a few instances in which he had broken all of those thresholds that I set out earlier of 12 threes, 33 free throws, and 15 twos in different individual games to make the case easier for why he'd be able to get it done in the same game. And that is one of the biggest issues here. I think it's pretty clear that Harden is capable of accomplishing each of the individual statistical criteria that we've outlined to this point separately. But does any player, even one with Harden's usage rate, have the sheer volume required in each shooting category to get close to 100 points? Well, maybe, and there's one game of Harden's career that gives me hope here. And no, it isn't the crazy overtime game against Washington earlier this year, or the 24 for 24 free throw game from this season, or even his career high for points in a single game. No, it's November 5th, 2017, a game in which Harden scored 56 points in a win against the Utah Jazz. The Rockets were up 30 points going into the fourth, and as a result, Harden only played 4.5 minutes in the fourth quarter, going 1 for 4 from the field and not attempting a single free throw, which means through 3 quarters in just over 30 minutes, Harden was 7 for 7 from 3, 11 for 14 from 2, 11 for 12 from the free throw line for 54 points through 3 quarters. If you say, for the sake of argument, that the game was close and Harden would play exactly as well in the fourth as he did through 3 quarters that night, he would have gotten to 72 points. And that doesn't account for the possibility that he would get even more shot volume and or minutes in the fourth than he would have through the first 3 quarters. So if the game was close, I think he could have threatened Kobe's 81-point game that night. Oh, and also he had 13 assists in this game, so if you take some of those possessions away and change them to Harden shot attempts instead, 100 points seems like a real possibility that night given a different set of circumstances. Now, there's a reason that I picked this game over others, because in some of Harden's other career games, specifically most recently, his crazy numbers can be attributed to the volume of shots that I continue to reference in this video. But his number of shots in this game isn't even all that crazy, at least not for modern day Harden. He has plenty of performances in which he shot well over 7 threes, 14 twos, and 12 free throws in a game. Keep in mind, this was back in the beginning of the 2017-18 season, a year in which Harden did lead the league in scoring, but hadn't put himself in the mid to high 30s points per game club that he now lives in. However, and this is where the video gets a bit sad, the probability of all this actually happening is pretty minuscule. they would have to be an incredible amount of things that came together for Harden or any other player to get to 100 points. 1. Career high shooting volume. 2. Career high shooting efficiency. 3. Sustaining 1 and 2 through an entire game. 4. The other team shooting extremely well to stay in the game. And 5. The possibility of overtime to give a few extra minutes to actually make this happen. Any 1 or 2 or even 3 of these things can happen in any given Harden game, and they have, as I've noted throughout this video, but they all have to come together on the same night for 100 points to actually be attainable. Which leads me to my last point, a prediction. Having gone through an extreme amount of research for this video, I'm confident in saying that at some point in his career, James Harden is going to eclipse Kobe's 81-point game. There is going to be a night in which he gets to the free throw line 25 to 30 times in a game and makes 10 to 12 threes and gets enough twos to make it happen. I'm telling you, there have already been some games in which Harden could have gotten close, but the other team just wasn't able to keep up enough for him to really push it in the fourth quarter, and at some point it's going to happen. Just think about it for a second. Russell Westbrook misses a game against a good shooting team that doesn't really play that much defense. Harden takes even more shots than normal as a result of Westbrook's absence. The game is close going into the fourth quarter, and Harden has 65 points through the first 3 quarters. And he takes over and breaks Kobe's 81-point post-merger NBA scoring record. It's going to happen, I'm absolutely sure of it, and I simply can't wait to see it when it does. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.